when we were talking about this kind of thing, there's someone who decided to weigh in on this entire discussion, and I'm going to see if I can share the article here.
Oh no! Whenever there's an article, it's bad news.
There's so many Rings of Power articles. It's been amazing.
Fuck! It's come up with an ad blocker thing. Yeah, it was a little taste from George R.R. Martin saying, "I don't understand why people can come to hate something that they love. They once loved." So talking kind of simultaneously about toxic fandoms within Lord of the Rings and towards his own shows, which
I mean, well, has he never had a girlfriend? Like, come on.
he's never been divorced, clearly.
That was one of the amazing things. He basically says people like Brand, so you should just like Brand, and no matter what Brand says or does, you like Brand, right? You like Star Wars. You'll always like Star Wars. Star Wars could do anything, but you like Star Wars. And then, if you don't like that, you don't like Star Wars anymore. You're just not a real fan in his eyes. I'm like, oh.
I think it's so funny when he's like, I can't understand the animosity that there is now towards Game of Thrones TV shows. It's like, did you watch season 8 at all? Like, did that pass you by, George?
I wouldn't be surprised if he hasn't, because he doesn't do any other work.
It's an interesting thing, right? Because I genuinely don't know anyone who's talking about House of the Dragon. Like, there's still a lot of chat on Rings of Power because everyone seems to fucking hate it. There's obviously a lot of chat around Star Wars and all that sort of thing, but nobody seems to give a shit about the House of the Dragon. That trailer just came and went like a fart in the wind. And I think, honestly, the ship has sailed with Game of Thrones. I think the normies have lost interest in it now because they saw Game of Thrones and even they recognized that season 8 was kind of shit and they just thought, right, I'm done with this now. I'm not interested anymore. And the hardcore fans are just probably pissed off that he's focusing energy on this and not writing Winds of Winter. So I feel like it pleases no one. Nobody's interested in this show.
And the IP came to a nice conclusion. It was a terrible conclusion, but it finished. You know what I mean? Like, the story was done. And so you get that kind of ending. Even though like nobody liked the ending, the story was at least finished. It was all wrapped up. And then you want to come back and do a prequel. And no, I can understand. And the worst decision they've made is they want to go head to head with Rings of Power. And he's like, oh yeah, if we get 7 Emmys and they get 6, I'll be fine with that. I don't think it's a big fight between them. We can all do amazing at the Emmys. Like, that's who he cares about. He cares about the awards. He cares about the pomp and ceremony.
Yeah,
the prestige of it all.
The accolades, the ego stroking, just all that shit. This is what I've said about George for ages now. Like, he has lost interest in doing the hard graft of like finishing Winds of Winter and then doing A Dream of Spring. What he cares about is just doing more producing gigs on shows where he can just give some script ideas and then watch them get turned into these like big multi-million-dollar productions, and he can just show up to all these premieres with his fucking captain's hat on and get loads of pictures taken and get given loads of fake fucking accolades that no one cares about. It's all about stroking the ego. It's not about doing any actual work at this point. And that's why every like fucking year or so he'll put out a blog post saying, yeah, I'm still working on Winds of Winter, but just enjoy my other projects, the things that are really easy. Just enjoy them and don't hassle me because I don't want to have to do work because I'm old and tired now. That's where he's at.
In that same article, he says, I think people don't like this new stuff because it's changing. I'm like, yeah, the reason people don't like Obi-Wan is because it's nothing like the actual IP. Reason people didn't like Halo is it's nothing like the IP. He says, but writers need to change things because otherwise they'd get bored. They don't want to write the same old stories in the same old universes. I'm like, that's why he hasn't finished the book. He sees continuing those stories, not as new stories that he could write for the old characters, but he sees it as just boring old content. He wants to move on to the next thing. He's like someone who started a project and he's got fed up with it.
Yeah, and that's why you have to set yourself a deadline to finish it.
Yeah, I would appreciate that if it would like if he was honest about that. If he said, "Guys, I've lost my passion for writing this," I'd be like, "That happens, and that's fair. Pass it to somebody who is, so we can get the
Yeah,
fucking
hasn't he
ending to the
said?
story."
I think Gary said this, that he said he doesn't want anyone else to finish the book. Like even if he
Ugh.
dies tomorrow, he said he doesn't want anyone else to. Like Wheel of Time was finished by Brandon Sanderson, and he wrote out like the final chapter, and because he knew he was close, so he wrote out an outline for all the other books and where he wanted it to go, so someone else could do it. Because you owe your audience that. That's like your duty to pass on the torch to somebody else, so that your audience, who should be the most important thing for you, actually get a conclusion. And he's like, no, I don't care about them. I want an Emmy.
Yeah, this is the thing, right? As a just a purely creative endeavor, yeah, you're entitled to write whatever you want. You know, like if you want to spend, years of your life doing like a multi-volume companion set to the main narrative, that's within your purview to do. But your fans are not obliged to read it, and they're not obliged to enjoy it. And when you're a commercially successful author like he is, you're not just a guy who's doing this for his own pleasure. You're a business entity. And so you've got your fan base who made you what you are. They made you the success that you are, and they made you extremely wealthy and very successful. You have entered into a contract with them, and you now owe them something. And so you might not want to do it, but like you need to finish that book as a moral obligation almost to them, because they're the people that made you successful in the first place. You've got to give them something back. And I hate this petulant fucking childish attitude of like, well, you should just enjoy whatever I choose to produce, no matter how like fucking random it is and how unrelated it is to what you're actually invested in, because it's me. You're bought into me as a brand. It's like, no, they're not. They care about the narrative that you were weaving. That's what's important to them. They don't fucking care about like whatever random vanity project you want to take on or whatever prequel you want to do. That's not what they're interested in. They want a conclusion to A Song of Ice and Fire. And if you're too fucking lazy to do it now, like, yeah, you need to pass it on to someone else who can actually conclude it, because it's really shitty behavior and it's really unprofessional behavior for an author like that to refuse to fulfill that obligation.
Yeah, that's the way you get it. It is a case of you have the freedom to do anything, but just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And I thought moral obligation is the right term for it. There are things which you're not forced to do, and you are free not to, but it's the right thing to do, and you should do it. And especially when you're in sort of any entertainment space, like I don't want to watch Obi-Wan Kenobi, but people want to see the videos on it, so that's what you do, right? The like comedians, they may want to be taken seriously and go off and write some fantasy epic, but they're comedians. Their job is to make people laugh. There are things that you are required to do, and if you didn't want to write a fantasy epic series for $10, then write one with 3. That he could have done that. He chose not to.
Speaking of that, by the way, when Jay put out tweets critical of the show, someone quote tweeted him saying, why the fuck are you watching it if like all you're gonna do is hate it? Why even continue it if it's so bad? And Jay was like, it's my job.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, YouTube's not a job.
I love that. Yeah, get a real job. 9 to
Like,
5. That's
if they want to say that it doesn't follow conventional rules of jobs, that's one thing. But Jay will be like talking about. I think Jay has already said they're going to make a video on this show. So
I think there's two strands to it. One is that it's a thing with a considerable amount of interest, and so you're almost obliged to make a video about it as a movie critic or a film critic or whatever. And on the other hand, like with you, with Jay, with myself and other people, like you've got kind of an investment in these characters. And even if you hate the concept of the show, you at least care enough about them to see what they do with them.
Well, yeah, because there's a lot of people out there who will watch it and be like, "This ain't right," but I'm not entirely sure why. And then they'll tune in and be like, "Oh yeah, they shouldn't be doing that. Oh yeah, like that is what they I assume are listening to us for." They want us to do it, let's say, quickly and coherently, explain what's wrong with it and stuff. But yeah, as you just said, like Ahsoka, for example, I don't think I'll be watching that unless there's a lot of interest from my audience about my opinion on it, because I just don't care about it. But Kenobi, yeah, I would have watched this show if I didn't have YouTube at all. I would have. I'm relatively invested, especially in the fact that it's Ewan McGregor. I want to see what they do, and I'm very upset. This nothing about this is like being done specifically for the audience at this point, but that's an element that can play in depending on what we're covering. But yeah, it is weird because you get a lot of that online now. It's like, why watch something if you're not enjoying it? From people who say your work is bad, by the way. It's like, how do you know? Are you watching it? Why would you watch it? Don't you hate it?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
The one thing I got a lot of with both Wheel of Time and Halo were people in the comments going, I'm really glad I saw this video because I thought I was going insane. Like, everywhere I go, all the reviews say it's amazing, the video say it's amazing. Big Halo channels, Wheel of Time channels were all going, this is the best thing I've ever seen, you should love this. Like, but I think this is awful. And then when they finally come across someone which is actually pointing out what they see, like, I'm so glad this exists. There's definitely a space, and it should exist. Two sides of anything should exist. And then people can make their own minds up which they prefer or which they find most entertaining watching.
I think it as well. Like, if you're able to back up your opinion of a show or a movie or whatever, saying like, okay, this sucks. Here's like 10 reasons why. Here's all the problems with it. It's kind of then hard to then just label you as like, well, you're just a hater because you're doing it for clicks or whatever. It's like, well, no, like, I've given you my reasons why I dislike this thing and why I think it doesn't work. Like, as a writer on a purely like mechanical level, here's all the problems with it, whatever it might be. Those are pretty valid reasons. You can dispute them if you want, but like, at least you're providing something to your audience. That's what people want, I guess, that understanding of where the problems lie.
Yeah. It's so weird that they're so celebratory, typically, of like loving media. They're just ensconced with the idea of it, but it's like, you understand there's another part that comes with that. If you love a thing, it's like, well, so what would be the inverse? What's the opposite feelings you can have? And we're okay with that one too, right? Yeah, it's all good.
It's this,
fine.
What it is though is this terrifying idea of well, if you like a thing, like if you like Star Wars, you're just going to automatically like any Star Wars thing that comes out. However shit it is, it doesn't make sense. Doesn't matter. The characters are completely different people now. Doesn't matter. It looks like garbage. Doesn't matter. It's Star Wars. You should just enjoy it. Same with Marvel. Same with whatever it might be. And that is just a really terrifying prospect as any kind of critic of media, I suppose. Like, particularly for me as a writer, it's like, no, you should at least expect a level of quality with the writing, with the storytelling behind it. That's why people watch this. Like, that should be why people watch this stuff, because they're genuinely enthralled by it.